Well, we could still start without starting. Dennis, was that a green light as if we're on the internet now? Okay. Okay. So, good morning, everyone. We are starting a new series. We're in the book of Genesis for the next 6 months on Sundays, and we're going to start in Romans. And whatever letters that we've done in the last 1 year, we're not going to redo those unless the elders give me the green light, and then we'll redo those lessons. And maybe I'll leave it up to them. But what we're doing on Sundays is we're doing this Genesis study. And last time, about 4 years ago, we went through Genesis, but it was such an overview. This one, it's 6 months on it, so maybe a little bit longer. It still feels like an overview. I feel like we could do Genesis 1 through 11 in 6 months, easily. And so anyway, our thing is to go through the whole book. And then if you have your workbooks with you, great. This is the companion edition, but you should have one with spiral on yours. And if not, it's on the back table. If it's not on the back table, it's underneath the back table. So get one if you don't have one. And we'll go through these lessons on a weekly basis. And what's going to happen is next month, Levi and I are going to go to Maui, work with the church on the island for about a month. And so I think Zach's going to be here during that time. And I'm not sure if he's going to bring his class out here, or if he's going to teach a class, or someone else is going to teach a class here. But that's kind of still up in the air as far as that. That'll be toward the end of March before we leave. So that said, let's begin our Bible study with a word of prayer, and then we'll get going. Dear Father in heaven, I come before you grateful that you've blessed us with the opportunity to be together once again. And I pray that as time unfolds, that more of our brethren will be able to be back with us and among us and be able to study God's word, your word together. Thank you for us being able to start at the beginning, the foundation of all the scriptures, and pray that some of the things that we will discuss this morning will help impact us in our future studies. So bless us in this endeavor. I pray that you will be with our brothers and sisters who are struggling, whatever the struggles may be. Bless them, look over them, and help us to be your hands and feet for them. But Father, also bless us as we labor in your vineyard so that souls can be saved, even and during any time, including this pandemic. So we thank you for the opportunity once again to be with us and to see us through this service. So we thank you in the name of Jesus our Lord. Amen. All right. So, yep, thank you. If you guys need one, raise your hand, and Johnny has some copies, and he'll get them to you. If you're on the internet, I'm sorry, you got to come here if you want a book. All right. So, story of creation. What pops out to you when you think of Genesis, particularly Genesis chapter 1? What stands out, if anything? In the beginning, just like the very words, right? In the beginning. So you have the whole Genesis. That's what the beginnings mean, right? So that stands out. The beginnings, or in this case, the beginning. What else pops out?
Some themes for the rest of the Bible.
Some themes for the rest of the Bible. And there are a ton of themes. Themes that some can be very easy to see, and others are going to be extremely ambiguous. But the more you keep reading through the scriptures, the more these themes will begin to pop up. I'm challenging myself to read the book of Genesis 50 times this year, and I think I'm on number 7 right now, and I'm seeing things that I had not seen on the first, second, third, fourth readings. And so you'll begin to see some of these things, and it's really eye-opening. So themes, absolutely. Anything else? I was asking questions earlier this week on Facebook, whether it's in our private church page or publicly on my own timeline and what have you. And I was asking questions like, what is the light in Genesis 1, verse 2 and 3? What is that? And other questions like that. Anything stand out for questions that you might have had during this week in preparation? Oh, well, there's lots that I have. So we won't be able to get to it all today because we're only doing lesson 1. But that said, I want us to note some things that I find absolutely intriguing with regard to this. I want you to look at, these are recent from last summer photos from the Hubble telescope. And I only got 2 that I'm going to show. And this one is called the Jewel bug. And I've just found it so cool that Here you think you're just looking at stars and things. You got all these gases that are all about, and when you look at them, they're just absolutely pretty and magnificent. Others that look like the eye, just things like that. Here's another one called the Butterfly Nebula. And check this out. This is what they found out when I show you this. It's going to take a little bit for it to load. But notice this, how they zero in on this nebula. The amazing high definition of these photos. I think it's in the Milky Way galaxy. I didn't look at the thing, but it looks like our Milky Way galaxy. And our internet doesn't do too well, apparently. Well, if that's the case, we won't need to do this. Focus in. I think that's it. So anticlimactic. Isn't that gorgeous? I just find that absolutely fascinating. Last year when these photos came out, I was just blown away at the colors and the views and the shapes and everything. It was just fantastic. And so when, when going through all of that, you just think, wow, there's got to be a God, right? I'm talking about it from a outside perspective, not from a Christian perspective. And for me, if I were not a believer, maybe I would think differently. But I'm thinking, how can you not think that there is a quote unquote designer that can make these kinds of huge entities that are so vast? I don't know if any of those pictures that we saw span our solar system, or how much larger they are. I never did the research on that. But the bottom line is just gorgeous how you look at this, like artwork. And then I think the very first words after, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. And I want us to read that verse in verse 2 and 3 with regard to this. Notice what it says in verse 2. The earth was without form and void. I'm reading out of the New King James, right? The earth was without form and void. Darkness was on the face of the deep, and the Spirit of God was hovering over the face of the water. So verse 2. That is the Hebrew phrase for this tohu vavohu, right? So depending on how you, whatever Jewish person that you'll say, they might have a va, but it's all the tohu vavohu is the way it's pronounced. And there's different ways that word is, or words, the phrase is used. One was formless and void, New American Standard, unformed and void, confusion and emptiness. This is the same exact words in Isaiah 34. But instead of formless, it's confusion and emptiness. One Hebrew scholar put it this way. It's wild and waste. It is the epitome of chaos. And so that's why the confusion aspect comes in, right? And when you stop and think about this, what is the whole purpose of creation? To put what? To put this, whatever, this formless and void thing into what? Order. That's the whole concept of creation, putting into order that which is disorder, right? And so that's the purpose of this story. And so the very first two verses of Genesis is telling us that in the beginning, God was putting into order what was disorder. And here's what I want you to do as we go through the study in Genesis, particularly these first 11 chapters. And it's going to set a template, as David was talking about the various themes in the Bible. One of these themes is the idea of creation, or I don't know if this is even a good word, but I call it decreation. When you go back to disorder, when you go back to confusion, when you go back to chaos, and then God is going to reset those things and put them back into order once again. All right? So keep that theme in mind, because toward the end of this chapter, we're going to come back to this very theme of order and disorder. Okay? And so we've got that concept, and we're going to read the chapter again, but I want you to see a pattern. And from various Hebrew sources that I'd read, this is what they come up with. When we read Genesis, we typically go, okay, day 1, God creates this. Day 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, God creates. The way the ancient Jews, from my understanding in reading various books, was what God does is he actually creates on days 1, 2, and 3, and he fills or populates on days 4, 5, and 6. Okay? That's the way they viewed it. And so it's almost like this rhythmic pattern. You got days 1, 2, and 3. You know, what does he create on day 1? Let there be light. So he creates light on day 1. What does he create on day 2? This is like Bible study 101. This is like creation, brethren. So in your mind, creation, day 2, he separates the waters from the waters, right? He's got this firmament or sky or expanse. That's the concept of this thing called firmament. And he separates the waters from the waters above the firmament from the waters below the firmament. And so on day 2, that's what he creates. What does he populate it with on day 5? Waters above the firmament. What are up there in the sky? The birds. What's there on the waters below the firmament? All the sea creatures. That's what you see on day 5. What does he make on day 3? Day 3, he separates the waters from the dry land. Just read day 3, right? So day 6, what does he populate the land with? Land animals and mankind. And so the way the Jews would look at it, they would look at it as this parallel, this rhythm of creation and then population, right? So he creates and then he fills what he has created with various entities. And so these things may be new for your way of thinking, but that's just the way they thought it. The way we think naturally is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. This is what he did. This is what he created and all that. And in a sense, he does create. But look, when he talks about when he creates from man, he already has the earth created. And what do we come from? The earth itself, right? So the fish, they come from the oceans and kind of thing. So that's the view that they would have. And so keep that in mind as you read Genesis and see if it changes how you are looking at Genesis chapter 1. And then we'll get into the why this is important. Okay? So keep that in mind as we go through the reading of Genesis chapter 1. So that's one thing we're going to look at. The next big thing after the 6 days of creation is this concept of man, right? Here's what's so amazing. Remember that pattern of creation, decreation, what have you? I want to think about this. Of all the creatures, we know that there's a distinction between when God creates man and all other creations, right? At least on earth. Okay, I say that very intentionally. And so I don't want to get into the implication of what I've just said because that would take us down a rabbit hole right now. But from an explicit standpoint, when God creates man, what is the distinction between all the things that are created on earth from mankind?
Man has dominion.
Yes, man has dominion. Why does man have dominion?
Because he's in the image of God.
Yeah, that is crucial right there. And so again, multiple themes, right? One of them is the idea of creation, decreation. One of them is we are made in the image of God. And so when we read through these verses 27 through 30, 31, in that area, we're going to see why man is made in the image of God and what's implied within the text when man is made in the image of God. So, Linda, you were saying that man is to have dominion, but dominion over what?
Over the earth and everything in it as God had granted them.
Okay, yeah. So what God is saying is, man, I want you to have dominion, just like God himself has dominion, right? It's in a sense, we're reflecting his godship, if you will. here on earth by having dominion the way he has dominion. And so what we are going to be given dominion over are the birds of the air, over the sea creatures, and over the land animals. That's what we read. Okay? And so he tells us to do something as a result of this dominion. Just as we have been created, what are we to do? Go fill the earth. Just as God creates and then fills the earth, now we're going to create and fill the earth. And so the creation takes place in the making of more humans, and then we populate the earth. That was the picture. And so what would that look like practically? If you've got sea creatures, you got birds, you got animals, and you have man, how do we reflect God's image through this process? What does that look like?
Taking care of it.
Absolutely. That would be one thing that we will be doing among many others. We're going to take care of the creatures that God has entrusted to us. Now, I can see the potential tension going on. Environmentalists, right? But there's something to be said for taking care of this planet that God has set us as dominioners, if you will. And we are going to take care then of the very creatures that God had made. We are absolute stewards. Yeah. And so that's how we have dominion. You know, we take care from a very, maybe this is not as heavy as it needs to be, but I think about the Davis household pets. And among them, the most prominent are a dog and a cat, right? And so when the dog and the cat are fighting, what do we dominioners do? You're like, no, you don't eat that person's food or that dog's food or that cat's food or things like that. You have dominion. You domesticate those animals from that vantage point because that's what we've chosen to do. Because they could be left out wild and free, roaming around the earth. But we've domesticated them. We've had dominion over them. Sometimes we use them as stewards for our benefit, right? Any of us ever had an oxen tread out grain? Oh, sorry, different century. So, but that's what we as humans have done, right? We've taken the things that God has granted to us and we've had dominion over it. What are we doing right now from a standpoint of just on the very limits of the earth itself? Just think of our solar system. Where are we traveling? Mankind is traveling to right now. By 2026. Mars. In fact, I think in the next 2 weeks, unmanned Mars, there's 3 different countries going to be landing probes on Mars in the next couple of weeks. Those are things that we're doing. Of course, that's just so super close to planet Earth, right? Even though it's far away from our thinking. We've got responsibility as stewards here on this planet that we have, and it seems to be expanding from that vantage point. So Genesis 1, verse 26-27 reveals that we were created in God's image, and so not only are we stewards, but as I just implied, what else do we do? We explore. We create. Right? We create things to explore. We've gone to, I don't know if I'm pronouncing it correctly, so correct me if I'm wrong, the Mariana Trench? Not Mariano. Mariana Trench. What's so cool about the Mariana Trench?
Deepest point on the face of the earth, and it's deeper than Everest is high.
And what have we found at the bottom of the Mariana Trench? Well, that too, yes. We have found trash. We have found creatures that we've never seen before. Go to other places. Right now in Hawaii, next to the big island, with all the lava growing from, there's a nearby island underwater right now. They're discovering new marine life. Like never seen before, never categorized in any genre scientifically. So really cool that we're still exploring this planet when we think we've gone to just about every square inch of it that we can think of. And then we're also digging beneath the superficial layers where other civilizations have come before us. And we're finding actual civilizations, cities. Every month there's something in the news all around the world of cities of bygone centuries. And so just really cool our ability to explore. And so in the process of all of this, we're making humans. How to reflect God's image in addition to being stewards of what God's created and exploring and creating. What is it that we all are as humans? Are we not representing a community of humankind? Do we not all need to relate to each other? And do we not have a responsibility in how we relate to each other, reflecting God, because we are made in His image? There's so many sub-themes that we get that if we were to take the time to digest, we could go on for hours on this discussion. So the point being is, we've got, in the beginning, God created, right? And then we see the creation process, and then we narrow in at the pinnacle of creation, at least as I see it in chapter 1, with mankind, and then told explicitly, go and go fill the earth, go subdue it, go have dominion over it, be fruitful, multiply. There's this blessing involved. And all of that then entails this beginning chapter. Now, why do you suppose, if Moses is the author of this book called Genesis, why do you suppose this is the way Moses starts things off? And what's his trajectory?
Number one, he started off this way because that's what God told him to write down.
True.
Observe any of this personally, so he's recording what God tells him to write down.
Okay. And what would be the purpose of this? If we're seeing this concept of creation, and then later on we're going to see the theme of creation where decreation, the reverse of creation, takes place, and then another creation, and so on and so forth. What's the purpose of this starting point and this trajectory?
That God was from the beginning.
Okay, God is from the beginning. He makes man in His image, and He has a relationship with man, and He has a story to tell of His relationship with man. There's purpose in being created in the image of God. We have been made with purpose, and what we are now reading is the story unfolding as to our relationship with our Creator and what happened in this relationship, what God wants to see come to fruition through this relationship, through the unfolding of the story of creation and the first chapters. So it's not just tell a story, but there's a reason for the telling of the story, and He wants us to see the end. And if we can kind of hit the punchline right now, what's the end game? The end game is man and God together forever. That's the end game, where we can harmoniously work together as one, where we can be His image bearers, the way He had intended from the beginning, right? So that's the concept that we have in the book of Genesis. It's not just Genesis 1, creation. I mean, there's a whole lot of purpose behind that phrase. Ray?
This may be a nuance because I 100% understand that God knew what was going to be happening. But in reality, God set up the Garden of Eden to be that permanent relationship that He had with man. And man couldn't do our part of it to maintain that relationship at that point in time.
That's true. God knows that man is going to be placed in the garden. Man's going to sin. And the garden was the beginning point. I don't know if the garden was ever supposed to be the end point, but it was definitely the beginning point. And the reason why I say that is if you go to the last two chapters of the book of Revelation, you've got the picture of the garden, but it's not a garden. What is it? It's a city, but it's all the pictures of Genesis chapter 2, I should say, right? You got the tree of life. You got the rivers flowing out of it, just like Genesis chapter 2. You have man and God together, just like in Genesis chapter 2. There's a lot of things, but instead of garden, it's the city. And so I don't know if that plays into what we're talking about here, but definitely the beginning point that we see that God had ideally for man. That is man and God together in this relationship, and man reflecting God in that relationship. But thanks for bringing that nuance out, Ray. Anyone else? Okay. Comments or questions so far? Okay.
Long days versus short days.
Okay, interesting. So Ted is bringing up, let's talk about long days versus short days. And so the scriptures here talk about days, right? So let's read just the first couple of verses and get this first use of the word day, and then we'll kind of talk about that. It says in verse 1, In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. The earth was without form and void, and darkness was on the face of the deep, and the Spirit of God was hovering over the face of the waters. Then God said, "Let there be light." And there was light. God saw the light, and it was good. God divided the light from the darkness. God called the light day, and the darkness he called night. And so the evening and the morning were the first day. Now, Ted's question was, let's talk about the difference between the short day versus long day. So first of all, we have to understand, what are we talking about when we are talking about short day versus long day? So Ted, what is that distinction?
Call it short day, we should call it 24-hour day.
Okay, 24-hour day. And then what would be the antithesis to that 24-hour day by those who look at Genesis 1 differently?
They were not defined by 24 hours. They were defined as ages.
Okay. And so the opponents to the 24-hour day were those that are saying it's a day representing a period of time, a season, if you will. And so you have some that propose what's known as a gap theory. And what they're saying is, on this first day when God said, "Let there be light," it represented a period of time, because to God, a day is as 1,000 years, and 1,000 years as a day. And so they would say, this is a period of unknown time, but it's a long period of time and not a 24-hour day. The 24-hour day was just a use of time for this period, this block of time. And so I think that's what you were referring to, right, Ted? Short day, long day. So here's the thing, and this is where I think we as Christians in the 21st century need to kind of take our breaks and kind of hold it. We cannot, for the purpose of understanding Genesis the way the author is intending, interject our modern scientific ways of thinking into the text. I don't believe that Moses, if we're going to attribute this to Moses, that Moses was trying to answer questions as to the literal creation account versus a narrative that's bringing us on a trajectory in our relationship with God. Does that make sense? He's not trying to answer all our questions. He wants us to get what he's writing, to get his point, right? If I'm telling you a story like of Julie and my wedding, it's not so that you start having all these questions that I was never intending to answer. This is my story. I'm telling you my story. Get the point that I'm trying to get. Our wedding was awesome. All right? Get to that point. And so that's the pickup here that we should have. Let's get what Moses is talking about. And Moses was not trying to debate a 24-hour day from a eon's perspective. He's trying to get us moving along into this relationship between him and man. Okay? But thanks for bringing that up, Ted, because that is probably one of the most fundamental questions people today are asking. These questions that people are asking were not asked 400 years ago. You'd have to go beyond, well, maybe 500 years ago then, I should say. Because before 1600s, I don't remember reading of this question of the gap theory and so on and so forth. Not to say that those aren't important things for us to be talking about, to answer our own questions, but that's not what the author was intending. Any other questions? Ray?
I just want to reinforce that. I don't think you have to go back. I don't think you can go back that far. I would project that even like 200 years ago, they weren't talking about this. And in the study I've done, not in Hebrew, the Hebrew authors and scribes, they never questioned whether it was 20. They never even talked about whether it was a 24-hour day or not.
Right.
So this is really like 200 years that this has become an issue.
Yeah, so if you really want to start with the whole Darwin situation, that's where the level really picked up. I think 1621 I was reading something about people asking questions. There was a famous religious person that wrote about this type of long days back in the early 1600s. But Darwin is what really kicked off this whole concept of long days. So thanks for bringing that part up. Anyone else? Comments, questions? All right, let's read the text now. Okay, let's read it hopefully with this in mind. Okay? If we weren't going live stream, I'd have us read it in this room rather than me. But since you won't have microphones on you, I'll go ahead and read it. It says, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. The earth was without form and void, and darkness was on the face of the deep. And the Spirit of God was hovering over the face of the waters. And then God said, let there be light. And there was light. God saw the light, that it was good, and God divided the light from the darkness. He called the light day, and the darkness he called night. So the evening and the morning were the first day. And then God said, let there be a firmament in the midst of the waters, and let it divide the waters from the waters. Thus, God made the firmament, and divided the waters which were under the firmament from the waters which were above the firmament, and it was so. God called the firmament heaven. And so the evening and the morning were the second day. And then God said, let the waters under the heavens be gathered together in one place, and let the dry land appear. And it was so. And God called the dry land earth. And the gathering together of the waters he called seas. And God saw that it was good. Then God said, let the earth bring forth grass, the herb that yields seed, and the fruit tree that yields fruit according to its kind, whose seed is in itself on the earth. And it was so. And the earth brought forth grass, the herb that yields seed according to its kind, and the tree that yields fruit, whose seed is in itself according to its kind. And God saw that it was good. And so the evening and the morning were the third day. And then God said, let there be lights in the firmament of the heavens to divide the day from the night. Let them be for signs and seasons, for days and years. Let them be for lights in the firmament of the heavens to give light on the earth. And it was so. And then God made two great lights, the greater light to rule the day and the lesser light to rule the night. Also, he made the stars. God set them in the firmament of the heavens to give light on the earth and to rule over the day and over the night and to divide the light from the darkness. And God saw that it was good. And so the evening and morning were the fourth day. And then God said, let the waters abound with an abundance of living creatures, and let birds fly above the earth across the face of the firmament of the heavens. So God created great sea creatures and every living thing that moves, with which the waters abounded, according to its kind, and every winged thing's a bird, or every winged bird according to its kind. God saw that it was good, and God blessed them, saying, be fruitful and multiply. Fill the waters in the seas, and the birds multiply on the earth. And so the evening and the morning were the fifth day. And then God said, let the earth bring forth the living creature according to its kind, cattle and creeping thing and beast of the earth, each according to its kind. And it was so. God made the beasts of the earth according to its kind, cattle according to its kind, every creeping thing according to its kind. And God saw that it was good. And then God said, let us make man in our image, according to our likeness. Let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, over the birds of the air, and over the cattle, over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creeps on the earth. And so God created man in his own image. In the image of God, he created him, male and female, he created them. And then God blessed them, and God said to them, be fruitful and multiply and subdue the earth, or fill the earth and subdue it. Have dominion over the fish of the sea, over the birds of the air, over every living thing that moves on the earth. And then God said, see, I've given you every herb that yields seed, which is on the face of all the earth, and every tree whose fruit yields seed. To you it shall be for food. Also, to every beast of the earth, every bird of the air, and everything that creeps on the earth, in which there is life, I have given every green herb for food. And it was so. And then God saw everything that he had made, and indeed it was very good. The evening and the morning were the sixth day. Did anything else stand out to you in this reading? Things were popping for me. So I wanted to know if it popped for you.
So we started off vegetarians.
Yeah. Not only vegetarians, certain kind of vegetarians. What did we eat that was not given to the animals to eat? Everything that had seed in it, from the trees to the plants. Go look at the verses. And every other thing that was not yielding from its seed, those were given to all the animals. And so it's almost as if mankind, you eat this green stuff over here, and in all the beasts and other stuff, you guys eat all the green stuff over there, kind of a thing. That's the picture that I'm getting, nuance-wise, if we're going to talk vegetarian from that standpoint. So interesting, we all have something to eat. We never have to go barging in on anyone's territory, so to speak. Everything is divided. Everything is divided. Light from darkness, right? Day from night, waters from waters, seas from land, all the things of its kind. Everything is divided. What is God doing? Putting everything in order. That's the whole creation process. It's almost like you come to my house, you look in my garage, and you think, what a wreck. We need order. We're going to create order here. And then everything has a place, and a place for everything, kind of a concept, right? Creation. Everything is no longer chaos and confusing. That's the picture. So that stands out, the whole concept of orderliness through division. And this division doesn't end here. It's a theme for the rest of the Bible. This dichotomy is going to exist all throughout Scriptures. What else stands out? Did you think about verse 14? I want you to look. We got a few minutes left. I want you to look at verse 14. And I read verse 14 and verse 15. I kind of slowed down a little bit. And I want us to read that again and see if you pick up on it. Remember, days 1, 2, and 3, what does God do in contrast to days 4, 5, and 6?
1, 2, and 3, he prepares.
He prepares, he creates, and 4, 5, 6, he populates. Yeah, I mean, that's a general way without going into all the nuances. But look at verse 14. Then God said, let there be lights in the firmament of the heavens to divide the day from the night. Let them be for signs and for seasons, for days and years. Let them be for lights in the firmament of the heavens to give light on the earth. And it was so. That's 14 and 15. Now, whatever that is, he says, and it was so. Boom. Now he goes on to verse 16. Then God made two great lights. The greater light to rule the day, the lesser light to rule the night. What would we think that is? The sun and the moon. And then, in addition to that, in verse 16, what else is made? Stars. So, whatever verse 14 and 15, it's made and it was so. And then verse 16, it's made and it was so. So my question is, what is verse 14 and 15? That's the answer I expected.
Some say the presence, just the mere presence of God, just like when Moses got the tablets, that was the light.
So interesting, day one, God said, let there be light. And we don't know what that light is. We have conjecture, and we even have scripture that alludes, but there's nothing explicit here. Day 4, there are lights. Day 4, verse 14 and verse 15. There are lights being made, and it separates light from darkness, and it does things. It is a sign for seasons and so on and so forth. There's things going on in verses 14 and 15 that I have to tell you, in the past I would just read going, those are the stars being made. But then I read verse 15 and 16, and the way it's read, it's separate from verse 14 and 15. And verse 16, it says, and he made the stars also. Well, what was 14 and 15 then? Larry?
In Revelation 21 and 23, it says, and the city has no need of the sun or of the moon to shine upon it, for the glory of God has illumined it, and the Lamb is the Lamb.
Absolutely.
So what David was saying kind of backs it up.
And so that's my personal opinion. I believe that when God said, let there be light, it is He is the source of whatever this light that He has created. I don't know how it manifests itself physically, or if it's supposed to be physically or not, but I believe that what you just said alludes to Genesis chapter 1, verse 2. Then we get into what is verse 14 and 15.
Well, now, in verse 14, it completes with, and let them be for signs and for seasons and for days and years,
Correct.
which I don't know that we can divorce them from verse 16, since that is exactly what the things in verse 16 do.
In verse 16, we will look at the stars that we see, and we will use them from an astronomic standpoint to determine seasons.
And on the moon.
And the sun and moon, we do the same thing. Absolutely. I agree 100%. So what the ancients viewed was so this is going to get weird for you guys for a little bit, especially if you never studied this before, but this is the way the ancients viewed this. One of the biggest things about Judaism that was no different than any other part around the globe with mankind was the belief in deities, the belief in gods. Go back to your Romans and Greeks. And where did they look for their gods? To the skies, to the stars. The belief system is with idolatry and what have you, they would look at those stars and they would not just see physical entities that we look at as balls of gas. They would look at, these are the gods. These are the Elohim. Right? So in Genesis 1, it says, in the beginning, Elohim created the heavens and the earth. And the Jew with an idolatrous mindset, right? Because idolatry everywhere in their midst. We just don't live in this context. But in their idolatrous mindset, and reading Genesis 1, the obvious question that a Jew would ask that we are not asking today is, well, which God created the heavens and the earth? Because there's all kinds of gods. We don't think that way because we're like, there's only God, right? So in the beginning, God. So if you'll notice in Genesis 1, to Ted's point, I'm kind of alluding to Ted's point right now, there's only Elohim in creation. Go to Genesis 2 real quick and beginning in verse 4, because verses 1 through 3 to me seems like it goes with chapter 1. But in verse 4 is the first time you'll have Lord God. It's the first time. It's not just Elohim. It's Yahweh Elohim. This is the God that created the heavens and the earth. This is the God that created man in his image, and so on and so forth. And for the Jews, I think that was very telling. That is different for us. And so to answer your question more specifically, Ted, they viewed verse 14 and 15 as spiritual beings. That's how they would view it. And then verse 16 would be the physical manifestations, these actual stars, the sun and the moon that we look to for the telling of time and so on and so forth. So whether you agree with it or not, that's how they viewed it. And I think that's very telling for us. Again, to get the mind of an ancient reading this text. And you can even go into extra biblical texts on the whole creation account, and there was a lot of similarity to this point. All right? So, any final thoughts? Let me see what time we got. Oh, we're right on time. Any final thoughts? I know our time is just about done. Okay, so what I want you to do, I know you got your books. These questions, at least in the first part of the book before you get into the discussion questions, are very, very simple. Go through that all on your own. I'm not going to be going through all that real quick unless it's something that's very compelling that I want to talk about. Or if you want to bring something from those questions out to the class, I'll try and leave the last 5 or so minutes for that kind of discussion from these questions. But if you don't have your hand raised, I'm just going to plow through because I got things I want to talk about too. Because we only have 6 months. So, all right. If that's said, we're done with our class. We'll pick up on next Sunday going into lesson 2. Do some good study on lesson 2, basically Genesis chapter 2, and see if we can get some good discussions for that. All right. Well, God bless you all. Have a wonderful worship service this morning.